So this is the dedication in the book, which is really why I'm here. It's like, to you, the reader, create something you have complete control over. It doesn't matter if it's perfect. All that matters is that it's yours. That was driving me for a really, really long time.
Hey, it's Ami Sanyal. Welcome to Creative Pulse. You became a creative because you have great ideas, but when it comes to prioritizing your own work, my guess is you bump up against the same three hurdles we all do. 1, you can't find the time. 2, which project should you focus on? And 3, how do you finish anything without perfection paralysis setting in and sabotaging you? Today we're featuring Dan Nelken, who is a copywriter and creative director whose work has appeared in massive campaigns and international award shows. After decades making ads, Dan wanted to make a shift from professional creative to professional creator. But he is a busy freelancer and he's a young dad, and so he was bashing up against those same hurdles I mentioned at the top of this video. Thankfully, he pushed through, and the result was his best work to date, an internationally best-selling book on copywriting. In this video, Dan will share his experience making that shift from creative to creator. What I love about his advice is it is about a recent story for him. I love getting advice from people who are one step ahead of me on the journey, and that's Dan in this case. Number 2, Dan is a very talented copywriter. This book on copy that he wrote is one of the only ones that I'll recommend to people who ask for great books on the craft. And finally, he's funny. It's easy to listen to because Dan slides a lot of humor into his advice. So if you are a copywriter, a designer, a photographer, a director, any kind of commercial creative, and you want to make shit that matters to you, then you're going to love hearing from Dan Nelken.
Thank you, everyone, for coming. Thank you for supporting Creative Pulse. I know this journey for me, since I started creating content online, I started to hear from people, and I'd hear from people all over the world, but Canada and Vancouver specifically, there wasn't a ton. I don't know if it's just a Canadian thing where we're like, everybody together, nobody stand out. If you want to do that, go to America. But it just seemed to be, even in terms of community here in Vancouver and Canada, it's not there. So when Ami reached out, I live 4 blocks away. It was like, hands down, I do want to do this. He had just read my book, and am I echoing? No. And I said, I'll do the talk, but I don't want to talk about the book. I want to talk about why I wrote the book, which is more important to me. It's in the dedication in the book, and that's the book right there. I was as shocked as anyone that it became an international bestseller. It's been translated into 1 other language. Very impressive. It was Italian, and I've actually been paid by another country that I was surprised. They have the Ukrainian rights. It's a publishing company. I was surprised. I thought maybe that money should have gone to a drone or something, but I took their money, and to no one's surprise that book hasn't come out in Ukrainian yet. But yeah, the thing took off. It was number 2 on Amazon in the advertising category in the UK, in the US, in Canada, and I was just typing this thing 4 blocks away from my son's bed while he was at school, And I wrote it to kind of, help one person, like other than me, and it was just what I needed to hear, how I needed to hear it, and clearly that resonated with people. A lot of people needed to hear it in the same way. So this is the dedication in the book, which is really why I'm here. It's like, to you, the reader, create something you have complete control over. It doesn't matter if it's perfect. All that matters is that it's yours. That was driving me for a really, really long time. And I know, I'll just go through. This is really my journey from full-time to freelancer to free. Now, I'm not completely free, but I'm very close, and I feel like if I was a smarter person and knew what button to create and push, that I would be completely free, and I am very close. Tonight's session, what is happening? Yeah. So I'm going to go through why we're here, which I'm kind of covering, a bit about my background for those of you who don't know me, which is most of you anyway, personally, and my background in terms of my career. I'm going to share and go over what I've been doing these last few years, how I've been doing this stuff, how you can do this stuff, and then Q&A about doing this stuff. So why we're here? I mean, really, it's over the years working in advertising, like a lot of you, and working around creative people. I can't tell you how many times I'd look across the boardroom table, just so impressed and inspired by someone's creativity or brain in some way. And I remember thinking, well, you should be doing your own thing. You should be, imagine if you put some of that creative energy into your own business or brand or personal brand, like we spend all of our time creating for other brands and building agencies. And so I saw that a lot throughout my career. So for you, how many of you, I'm sure, show of hands, if you're comfortable, have ideas for yourself when you're coming up with ideas for other companies and brands? I'm sure lots of you do. And then probably don't pursue them, and they just keep coming and coming because the thing is always on. And then there's also this admiration when you see other people that you've maybe worked with or that are kind of close to you that are doing something. And it's kind of been both for me, where I'm like, I'm so inspired by what you're doing and impressed, but also, want to like kick them in front of a bus a little bit, because really it's like you're not doing the thing. And so I've felt that a lot, and there's been also frustration and anger with myself, but also I think maybe more relatable is like this, or just as relatable, the frustration and anger that we'll feel working with clients, client feedback, working for somebody else. I know I felt that a lot, and we tell ourselves in those moments, like, to calm down, to write the email tomorrow, all of those things. Like, we're not supposed to feel those things, or the envy of someone else is a bad feeling, to think that about someone else who's doing something, and so we bury it. But really, those are just human things to feel, and it's a sign that you want to do something too. And then, of course, there's just the desire that we always want to like do more in life and create more, and this isn't it. Like, I know I can do more. We all, I think, have that feeling. I think that's why most of you are here tonight. And then we all want more loonies and toonies. I think that's relatable, especially in Vancouver. So, we're always looking for signs. I know I was like, what am I supposed to do? I don't know what I want to do. I don't know which idea to pick and all of these things. I wish I had a book that just had answers for me. But I think these are the signs, the bad feelings. I think I always expected the sign to be like, a rainbow and very clear and to feel really good. But now that I've been paying attention, I'm like, oh, it's these bad feelings that I was just like suppressing because I was a bad person. But no, it's okay if you're frustrated and angry, feeling envy. Those are like also signs. And of course, sometimes they do feel really good, and there's like a clear sign. But yeah, I think for me, when I look back, now that I've pushed through to create some things, I maybe could have paid more attention to those things. This is a quote from Jerry Seinfeld. It's important that I tell you that first, I think, but because for people on my side of the cubicle, Jerry Seinfeld, which is not in a cubicle, the goal is always creativity. Spending your time overcoming, come on, Jerry, corporate resistance to creativity. I just don't want to do that. I don't think he really did. I mean, it's not realistic for all of us to be Jerry Seinfeld and to have a career like him. But I think we can all relate to this corporate resistance. Get a photo of that. I just clued in who you were. I was like, he looks familiar. Carson Ting. I'm just going to go through some people in my career that I've encountered that are doing things that have inspired me, and also, want to kick them in front of buses or whatever. Carson is speaking. He's the next speaker later this month. as an illustrator, and he was, I believe, an art director, and just leaned into his passion. Sapodilla soap, I don't know if you recognize this brand. My friend Jill, she's a copywriter, one of the best copywriters I work with, but she burnt out and she always struggled with maybe the corporate resistance and other things. Anyway, she hasn't worked in about 6 or 7 years. That company was bought out by the same company that owns Gorilla Glue. I don't know if you know these guys, but it's Rob, Brian, Scott, and Jeff who started 123 West, the agency that's very successful. They've done an awesome job, but this is them starting out in a garage. And then, of course, Rethink, the agency here that started here, was 2 creatives, and you know, there was a whole team of people that left a bigger agency to start their own. Mary Jo Dion is a copywriter I worked with many times. She was amazing. She was always doing something, building something. I remember she had a t-shirt. It was like the flea's knees. Just a simple idea, and I think proceeds went to, you know, neglected animals. But it took off, and it was, I forget her name, but she was in one of the actresses from 90210, Tori Spelling. Is that right? Next thing you know, Mary Jo and her friends are at the Playboy Mansion with Tori Spelling and all these people. She's done a one-woman show. She's now, I don't know if she's fully made the transition, but she was going over to London, taking screenwriting. Now she's doing screenwriting. Like, she's just always doing stuff. Danielle Crissa, who's more famously known as the Jealous Curator. When I started my career, she was an art director for web, which at the time was like so neglected, you know, web, internet, who would use that? Anyway, she had a blog when no one had a blog, and she was just sharing like art that she admired because she wasn't creating for herself. And so she was the Jealous Curator. She's written tons of books, talked on a stage with a red sign behind her. And you know, we saw her just chipping away at something. I don't even think in the beginning it was, this is going to be my career. And her and MJ, actually funny, David Sedaris, the author, when he was here, I went with Danielle, Mary Jo, and Jill, the one who sold the soap company. I never put that together. Anybody recognize the illustration style of these early ads? I'm forgetting his name is not, his mother didn't name him Dr. Seuss, but he worked in advertising before he started doing what we know him for. This guy, James Patterson, I don't know if you know, he worked his way up from a copywriter to the CEO of J. Walter Thompson in wherever in the US, I think it was Chicago, I'm not sure. He was doing this on the side for the longest time, and he started out, he sold more books than J.K. Rowling. Now, obviously, not all of us. He made, I read an article, it was like from maybe 10 years ago. That year, he made 90 million off book sales, which is nuts. And then we have Mike Cesario, the founder of Liquid Death, who was an art director, and freelance, art director in advertising, worked for some top agencies in the US. You know, his story, if you listen to him on a podcast, Mike Cesario, he's amazing, really, really inspiring in terms of taking all of the frustration, him not feeling like he fit in, and he just kind of created something that was very much in line with like who he was as a person. And this guy recently, his name is Rob Mayhew. He started out on TikTok. I think he was a strategist, and he was just kind of making fun of the industry and observations on the industry. And now I'm pretty much, I think he's like a TikTok consultant. He's interviewed everywhere. All kinds of collaborations, even the crazy sweaters he wears. The company that does that is sending him sweaters. And it was just from him deciding to create and start putting something out there. And it's just more evidence, and there's lots of it. I could have 30 more people who are doing kind of what you're doing. And it's just, they turned their kind of passion and skill set onto themselves, and we're like, well, if I can try this idea, I just stick with it. And anyway, now they're on one of my slideshows. I'm going to quickly go through my background, and then I'm going to tell a story you'll never forget. I was a forklift driver. This is going to be really quick. Oh, faster than even I was ready for. I went to ad school, then I drove a forklift again, and then I started my career at Cassette as a copywriter in Vancouver. And then when there was a TBWA Vancouver, I was a copywriter there. And then I started my own little thing. It was called the Goat Farm. And my friend Jill, one night we were working at TBWA, it was probably like our third night in a row, 9 p.m. And she said, why don't we quit our jobs, buy some land on one of the Gulf Islands and start a goat farm? And I ended up as a freelancer getting a decent size, like a piece of business. And so I said, hey, how about we start that goat farm? And it wasn't the one she had in mind, but so I did that for 6 years. And then I was like, I'm done. I remember, I think I did cry. I think it might have been the only time, because I'm a man. No, but in advertising, I had just lost it. I just thought we were so unfairly treated by this client. I had set clear boundaries on the type of work we want to do. I actually said no to taking this project. I would only do it under these conditions. I was like, good for you, Dan, like setting boundaries. And then the person leading it left, and the person taking over wanted to just show everyone who was boss. And I just drew a line. I just couldn't take it for myself and my team. And I just said, I'm kind of done. And I've been driven by that a lot. Like if I was a stronger person in some ways, emotionally, I would have stuck with it. So in a way, it's been a benefit. But I just couldn't do it like some of my friends who were able to stay in it. I was maybe too sensitive. I don't know. Anyway, so I meet this guy. Animation studio. They made these animated explainer videos for startups all over the world. It was taking off. He taught himself how to animate, and he sent a video to Alexis Ohanian, who's the founder of Reddit and married Serena Williams. He had a startup before Reddit, and he taught himself how to animate. He couldn't draw. It was like these stick figures. And he had a really thick accent, so it wasn't a polished voiceover like we're used to. And Alexis Ohanian posts this thing on Twitter. He didn't have a ton of followers then, but he was like pretty big in Silicon Valley. So takes off. Ashton Kutcher happens to be an investor. So he shares it. This is the funny explainer video I've ever seen. He's got, at the time, million something followers. I meet this guy then. And he didn't really have a huge like business acumen. Mine was like a tiny bit bigger. So I was like, charge 4 times what you're charging. And it was crazy. The guy who did this little weird character here, Ross Bollinger, when I would work with him, he was hard to work with, but for a reason, you know, it's just what we're talking about, because he was just passionate about his own thing, and he was like miscast in this role. When I worked with him, he had a YouTube channel called Pencilmation, and he would draw this little character, and a pencil would come in, and then he had to take a break from Pencilmation because he needed money. He was doing too much. Anyway, Pencilmation is worth, I think it's $32 million now. He had one video take off, and so he said, well, I'm going to take what I just made and invest it, and his production went up. At one point, I don't know if it's still true, but it was from an animated channel, more than Disney. This was just like a guy that's in Philadelphia that I worked with. Okay. This is the character in his little series. It's going to get weird now. So the founder of that company, he made all kinds of things, but he had something that I didn't, or he lacked something that I had too much of. It was like emotion. He was just a machine in a way. I think he's probably would be diagnosed with Asperger's, but it was really interesting to see he didn't overthink creating when most creatives do, and most creatives are like more sensitive, generally speaking. He didn't have that, so he would just make things. And anyway, so I go to this party. It was his birthday. I didn't know many people, and I was learning a bit more about him while I was there, and his personality and his lack of maybe emotion. His wife had said, when he's flirting with me, he says, "Hey, honey, I'm flirting with you now." And then things would get whatever. Anyway, these two guys come up to me. I was chatting with them, and they were two young Romanian guys who had just sold an app to Twitter for zillions of dollars. And they said, here's where it starts, has he told you about the fuck box? And I was like, what? Can you repeat that sentence? So I'm not even going to repeat it. I will say that word a few times, though, through this story. And so I guess as the story goes, I'm not going to show you the image just yet. Him and his wife were watching a Burn After Reading. And in that film, George Clooney's character had like a sex machine. And I think his wife had just made a comment like, man, I wonder what that would be like. So this guy who makes things, he was like an engineer. And again, this is going to make him sound really creepy. But he wasn't creepy. He just didn't, maybe a little, but he just was kind of like a machine. Once he said to me, I'm going to now do what you're doing because you're closing a lot of leads. I'm going to do this. And I said, how do you know that? He said, well, I've been reading your emails. I said, okay. So anyway, his wife says, I wonder what that would be like. So I'll just show you it. Okay, this is a fuck box. So he went and got a Mastercraft toolbox, and he drilled a hole in it. He took the shelves out. He attached a motor from an old sewing machine. There was a rod, and I think you can figure out the rest. This was like a dimmer switch. So anyway, I'm like blown away because I didn't really know this guy at all. And so I'm like kind of creeped out a little for sure. The next time I see him, I ask him about the fuck box. So what the guy did, he had a blog not associated with his business, obviously. And he didn't really have much of a business. I don't even know if his face was associated with it. So he posts, look at this thing I made. Of course, it's the internet. Kind of goes mini viral. And so he says, well, if you're interested, add your email list to whatever, this thing. Within like 2 weeks, he has 500 people interested in the F box. So what he did is just a PDF instructions. It still exists to this day, FUK box. It's pretty funny what he's written. He just sold the PDF, $20 US, and every single day for at least when I knew him then, for 2 years, he would sell at least one, just a PDF of the stupid thing. We'd be like out for lunch. We'd be like, oh, PayPal notification, ding, ding. I just sold the fuck box. And I was like, I need my fuck box. What is my fuck box? I knew I had more feelings than he did, and maybe like just awareness and self-respect. But this guy also, when people were making online courses, he made an online course. And this course was this was early days, 100 grand a year. And so then he made a course on how to make a course. He even made a course on, like he met his wife. I hope he's not here. He met his wife. He had a system for online dating. And he was like, if I meet this number of women and do this and that, then I will find my wife. And it worked. And he made a course about that. Nobody bought it. But this is the thing. I mean, he's made so many things that are very impressive. And anyway, okay. So I'm going to have some water. You are going to get awkward maybe. No, I think part of these events and part of the reason we come out is to interact with other people. If you're not comfortable, you can do this in your phone. But what I want you to do now while I get some water is you can have a conversation or make some notes on like, oh, actually, I'm jumping ahead. I think maybe just like share an idea with the person around you, or just be aware of it and put it in your phone. Something, it could be a bad idea, a terrible idea, any idea, something that you've had in your head for 10 years or 5 years, or something you thought of doing or might want to do, And if you don't have anything, just talk about someone who's doing something that you kind of admire, or maybe that person who you want to push in front of a bus in the most lovingly way possible. And I'm going to have some water. Okay, so I don't know if it's a few minutes, Ami, or what.
All right, guys, it's great back here.
Oh, thank you. Need to. That's power. So Ami and I were just talking about the next slide, and neither of us know what it is. So I figure I should know. Let's all see what it is. Ah, no. Oh yeah. Okay, I know what this is. So I haven't made it yet, as I was saying, but I'm making it. I've never really shared this before. It's like not that it's, yeah. So I have 40,000 followers on LinkedIn. I'm like a few hundred short. 8,000 newsletter subscribers. I've made over 100,000 in course sales since I launched that course. That's US. Counts. The book has been like 35 grand in the 2.5 years. I think with all of these things, like honestly, I wasn't planning on getting into this, but these numbers would be 5 times higher. I don't say if I knew what I was doing, but also like knew my own value and valued myself, knew how to price it. The book, when I'm going to make it the cheapest book. And I looked at all one, I wanted it to be more affordable, but if I'm being honest, it was like, I wasn't comfortable charging more for it. Now it's I don't know if it's more expensive than the others, but it's definitely not the cheapest. My course, honestly, it's 5 times the price of when I launched it. So with things like that and products, I've learned to like take your time, get the launch right, convince yourself of the value before you launch, because then you know. But like, I don't know how much is. Once you know and you're confident in the value, you can sell it. And I am now, and I will be selling it more. Not tonight. But the book is just $21.99. And like 30,000 on like talks and workshops that are just kind of starting to happen. US, all of this is US. Isn't that crazy? And then affiliate, that's good money. Once you can start getting that, you just like, once you build an audience, and you can, you know, you have to be careful with the things that you're schlepping. And then once you build an audience, you get asked to schlep things, and you get sent things. But when you find one that is like you believe in, and all of these courses or whatever it is that people ask me to, I take them first and make sure there's value, so I can do that. By the way, I took the slide out, but we have time. Affiliates with Amazon. I was an affiliate, and they sent me a check for $1.99. And they said, you're out of the program, because I wasn't selling enough. You have to meet a certain level. So not all good. Okay. So yeah, I started sharing on LinkedIn when I had this rough draft of this book. And I was like, I'll share bits of it once a week, because I don't have time to do it. I don't even know how to do it. So how could I commit to more? So that was it. And I did it on Mondays, which I then learned is the worst day to post on LinkedIn, other than maybe like a weekend. But once I learned that, I didn't stop. And I didn't stop because I was sharing what I thought were like helpful tips that would have helped me. And I did it at the beginning of the week, because you're going into a week, and maybe this will help someone this week. So as opposed to a Friday or Wednesday, there was like intention behind that. And then, you know, I started to go viral. I don't know if you can see, this is like over 3,900 likes and hearts and things, and shared 337 times. And this, I've so many of these. That's crazy. This is a bat that's almost dead. I did a talk in Pennsylvania, and I was horrible. That was the first time I was flown, and I was like really not good at any of the virtual talks I did. I think I wasn't comfortable either of saying, can everybody like smile and do whatever? And I want a photo. I just couldn't do that. So that's a bat in Pennsylvania. That's a photo I have. I'm starting to get better at it. This is me giving a talk to an agency just outside of New York. Not in New York. I'm not there yet. This is a talk I gave recently to Mattel. So there's writers from Barbie and Hot Wheels and American Girl and Mega all around the world. I asked them to all pretend like they fell asleep during my talk so I could share. I've been contacted by, all kinds of, these are like podcasts and stuff. And these started before the book. Look how happy we are. I'm now being flown for the first time to speak at CopyCon in London. This will be November later this year. So all like very shocking. It was like I can think to, actually I'll share, I have it on another slide. There's some brand name dropping. I have more coming. Like this is all just starting for me. It's all been in the last kind of, 6 months, I guess. That like other things have happened, but like the brand talks. And again, I had people and agencies all over the world, brands. I was like not getting back to people because I hadn't convinced myself of my value or that I was an expert. And so it feels good to be asked, but you have to convince yourself. And I didn't write the book because I was an expert. I was like, what do I need help with? And it's called a self-help guide for copywriters. I was writing it to help myself. And I was an insecure, kind of self-doubting creative. And then they're like, you, expert. I'm like, no, I'm the wrong guy. I'm not an expert. Now I've got this far, but I still don't know what I want to do. And I still feel like I don't know anything. So like, I don't think that goes away. You just kind of got to do stuff. So this was where we were going to do like another session. Yeah, okay. So I'm going to stop again. And I just want you now to talk about like what are some of the excuses. I know some of you, when you registered, sent questions or things you were asked, what you were struggling with. Maybe if you're comfortable, share them with the person next to you. Again, continue the conversation or continue the note-taking if you're more comfortable with that. And just maybe talk about what's stopped you in the past or what's stopping you now, like what's coming up. What are the excuses? And then I will go through probably some of the same ones and tell you what I've realized now that I'm on the other side of some of these things and have made some things about those things. This is totally unrelated, but about, I don't know, it was maybe 20 years ago it was like a dinner theater thing. It's like off the highway when you drive Highway 1. I don't know what it's like. Anyway, before the performance, there was a guy who walked around and was chatting with everyone. And there was probably 300 people there. And during the performance, he would go, hey, Tony, da-da-da. He would call you out on the balcony. He remembered everyone's name. It was insane. That's nothing, I don't know, there's a talk in there somewhere. I just thought of that. I was like, okay. So I'm sure you've talked about some of the excuses and some of the things that have been stopping you. And I know some of you shared some things in the forum. I'm just going to go through like my own experience with these things, these excuses that I had. I mean, there's more than I can fit in this slide deck tonight, but I'll talk about some of the popular ones. Like, anybody that's come up for anyone? Maybe one person. I'm too busy, kind of the same thing. Oh, let's go back. I mean, nobody has time. Like, I'm at an age now where, my in-laws and my parents are retired and they're really busy. They don't have time to do anything. Like, I'm gonna say it's not an excuse. The problem isn't not having time. It's like, oh yeah, we don't have time to exercise or these things. It's like we haven't formed the habit yet. And so you have to commit for a certain amount of time to form a habit, like even if it's 15 minutes a week or 30 minutes on Fridays. And then all of a sudden you have the time, like nobody has time to, I don't know, let's say 3 hours in a day, and then you get a puppy. All of a sudden you have fucking time to walk the dog and play with the dog and lose sleep. Like, and then, you go to like this stuff. What do we watch on TV? There's obviously the phone, podcasts, and social in real life. Like, I know for me now that I'm creating things and I see my life changing and I have more joy, it becomes easier to say no to certain things. Like, I can pretty quickly go, do I want to hang out with this person or do this thing? Like, when before I'd be like, oh yeah, let's have a drink. And now I'm like, nah, fuck that guy. No, but it becomes clear because it's taking value. Like I know what value I'm creating in the time now, and I also know no dog, kids, no kids. Like there isn't much time in life. Like that's what I realized too. Like if I live now that the seal is broken and I'm creating 1,000 lifetimes, I will never be able to create all the ideas I'm capable of producing. Like we all just like blood. Let's make a shoe. Like let's start a shoe company. Like we could do that. We just don't, so it's like you got to start. And I've become, I won't say more protective of my time, but I just value it more now that I'm doing stuff. Okay, so then there's also like self-help books. There's coaching, there's meditation, therapy, exercise, journaling, all bad. No, I'm just kidding. But, I overindulged in like all this stuff for the longest time. And so it's all good, but if you're not creating anything, you're not actually realizing the benefits of a lot of this stuff. And so now if I listen to a podcast and I know I'm creating, it's helping me, and it will help me make money. It will help me do things as opposed to just being theoretical and constantly like consuming inspiration. And then you're like, okay, I read a self-help book and I feel better. My life is forever changed. And then the next day you repeat all the dumb shit you were doing. And so it's like you stop doing that once you start and you form that habit. When you do have time. Oh yeah, this is another one. All of my creativity goes into my work. I said that probably 1,000,000 times. Oh. I've jumped ahead a little bit. But this is your personal creativity and your professional creativity feeding each other. When I think about when we have an unresolved creative problem, and if we're creatives, like our minds don't like that. And so they will obsess over that, and you give it as much time. Like you cannot work enough. What are we always asking for as creatives? More time. But like, as far as they've been like studying creativity, it thrives when you need to leave it alone and take breaks. And as I've been down this path and learning more about the brain, like I would never want to walk away from a brief that I hadn't cracked. Like I wouldn't take an evening off. I just couldn't. I would sick my mind on it like endlessly until the clock went ding and there's a deadline. But once you're like creating for yourself, like they do feed each other because you realize you now have formed the habit and you have to do it. But you also realize that I don't need to put as much pressure on myself to do like my life's work for this client or this agency. And when it doesn't go well and you get the negative feedback, which always comes, or the feedback you don't like or don't agree with, it doesn't hurt as much because you have an outlet. And I'm not just talking here about, making collages. Like for me, because I wanted my life to change, it was always to make money to change my life so I have more freedom and more control over my life and my time. It's happening. Like it's not been easy, but it is happening. I don't know which one of my ideas to pick. What if it's the wrong one? Comes up. For me, I was paralyzed by that. What I've learned is like I'm not super passionate about copywriting. I wrote a book on copywriting. I have a course on copywriting. What I realized too is like, and this is coming, but the passion comes from creating. When I think about every project I've got creatively in my career, I could have no interest in this client or this thing, but I always find passion and I want it to be good. So like you just have to pick something, because you look at any of these people, like some of the people I brought up, even Mike Cesario, the Liquid Death founder, he started with a brandy. Before that, it was t-shirts. Before that, like all the knowledge you gain from picking something gets transferred over to the next thing and the next thing. I have too many ideas. I can't pick one. Like you at a certain point, you just have to pick one, because one, the joy comes in the doing, but two, again, everything that you learn from pursuing that idea is applied to the next one. There is no wrong one. The wrong one is not doing anything. I have too many children. I have too many ideas. Super valid. They are so selfish. But you know, it's like, again, not having time. Nobody has time for one child or a dog or another child. But you have to, it can be 30 minutes a week. You can find that time for yourself. I have 2 young children. It was a couple of years before I hit publish on the book, I found out my wife was pregnant. And we had just sold the crib, having my son. We were like, we're done. And I thought, well, this is the perfect excuse to wait, you know, what, another 5 years until she's in school. And then I just I couldn't do it. And I wrote a note to her, thanking her and saying that I will never be able to give her what she's already given me, because I knew I would finish the book. Like, I wouldn't let this be an excuse. So I've already kind of covered this one. I'm not passionate about any one thing. Like, ideally, you know, we win the idea lottery and we have the thing we're super passionate about that comes so easy and there's never any problems, and that idea finds you and you do that forever and life's perfect. But again, the passion comes in the doing, and it's really what I'm realizing. I'm just not ready yet. That's the other thing. A parenting analogy would be like, nobody's ready. I had kids fairly late. I'm still not ready to have kids. You can't wait and to be like, okay, now I know enough to start doing something. Well, now I feel like an expert and I can write a book. Like, it works the other way around. You do the thing and then you have to learn how to like kind of accept that you might be an expert, and then, you know, make some money. Okay. There's so many, this is like social media, so many platforms. I don't know where to start. Like, just for myself, it was one platform once a week on Mondays. That was it. I think that can scare people away to think, well, you have to post this many times if you're going to do it, and it has to be like this, and you have to, like, who fucking cares? You know, if you're not creating anything, it doesn't matter what the response is, like all of that. Like, just, it's the habit, because it doesn't really matter. Like, here's the thing. Most people think what you're putting out there is like, most stuff is not very good. And people maybe don't have very high expectations, and people don't notice it. The only time you get kind of like trolled is if you go viral with something, if you have a post that doesn't do well, it's nothing. And so then you get the upside of going viral, and then the downside if someone hurts your feelings. And it's amazing how much you focus on that. But that's what happens. I think because you get to a point where you're getting X amount of views, you become just objectified and you're no longer a person. But people are so damn supportive. It's like such a small percent of people who are like unkind and do that. And we tend to focus on them, but I've realized through this, man, people are awesome. So I don't have time. Again, that's the same one. I don't know what to post about. But like, we're all creatives. You don't start, like in the book, I talk about headlines. I say like a great headline isn't, how can I even forget it? What is it? A great headline isn't a great sentence. It's a good idea expressed in words. And I used to get stuck because I would try and start with writing headlines. But it's like, no, if I come up with ideas first and fill the page with even really bad ideas, all of a sudden I can do that. And so if we take that approach with social, all of a sudden you could take, if you're not doing anything, take a year to just come up with ideas, bad ideas, every Friday, 15 minutes. Start the next year. Because if you're like me, you won't do that. And 15 years will go by and you're still like, I haven't done anything. I'm not an expert in anything. I've already covered that. It comes after. I'm too old. Look at me. I just started this. And I also think like the more senior you are as a creative, generally speaking, it's younger people creating. But the more senior you have so much value that they don't have. A lot of them are just parroting what someone else has posted and someone else has posted and someone else has posted. So if you are a more senior creative, like, yes, it feels old to post on social media, but or like we feel too, it's not. There's so much value there that the world isn't getting and you're not getting. You will never run out of reasons to not do things. Like, that's There's always reasons. Like I think for me, I realized once I started pushing through, that's sure they're all valid too, but you just can't let them stop you. Okay, we're not going to do a break here. I'm just going to roll through. There's like 2 more sections, and then I will have water and pizza and a beer. So I'm just going to go through my experience. Like this is why it's so hard to do things, because my momentum of not doing things was like, it's hard to stop that. And so it's not starting with, I'm going to post this many times a week. It's like, what can you sustain? It's hard to stop that. Feel that frustration too. Like for my book, it was really like, this was kind of what it was. And I started to allow myself to feel the bad feelings. I took a contract when I was close on the book, and I was like, I hope it's the worst one yet. I think it was. Maybe I made it that way. And I still have to take on contracts. But I did feel like a volcano I started to feel like, if I don't make anything, my dad is almost 80. And he's like, he wants to write a book. He's been saying that, for 40 years. So I'm like, okay, I have a good example of this right here. Like, he's like, I'm not ready yet. He still thinks he's going to do it. Find the motivation too. I mean, this is actually from an old PlayStation ad. I'm not going to play it for you, but it's based on a study. And in a lab, they had fleas in a jar. They know it. So you put fleas in a jar, you remove the lid, they jump out. You put the lid on, they hit the lid, and then they stop about an inch short. If you take the lid off, they never jump out, ever. If you dump them out of the jar, they never jump any higher than that point. And any flea born to those fleas never jumps any higher than that level. Isn't that crazy? Anyway, so that motivates me a lot when I think about even a talk where I'm like nervous tonight. I'm like, I'm going to pull the fire alarm and get out of it, or flying somewhere for the first time. I think about my kids and how, like, if I can just jump a little bit higher, maybe they'll be able to do it too. And I also see like just my friends and who have seen what I'm doing, and my friends who are doing things, to be like, yeah, man, if I'm doing it, I am like, maybe some people want to push me in front of a bus, but maybe some people are also inspired and will do it too. You can't start at the end. So this was, my book was a PowerPoint project as part of a course that I never made. And, it became something. So here's how I'm starting to at times make $4,000 US an hour. That counts here. So like I wrote a shitty draft of a book over 8 years while I was like taking on contracts that frustrated me. And I posted and refined bits of it on LinkedIn once a week for 2 years on Mondays. I appeared on some not so popular podcasts, but I knew, I was nervous, but I knew no one would listen to them. So I said, yeah. Slightly less shitty podcasts. I spoke at some schools. They started reaching out. This is even before the book came out. I started an email newsletter because people said, I don't always check LinkedIn. You should have a newsletter. So I started posting things saying, if you want to sign up for a newsletter, I might start one day, go to this link. And so people started signing up, and so I started. I hit publish on the book, sitting on my son's bed while he was at school. I appeared on more podcasts, spoke at more schools, started to be seen as an expert. I did some cheap talks. This one's free, by the way, for me anyway. I did some free talks to ad agencies. I launched that course. I raised the price on my talks. I got feedback on the course, more feedback. I did my first workshop. That was with Lululemon. I was flown to speak. I started to see myself as an expert finally, and then I started charging agencies and brands $4,000 for an hour. So what it is like I'll speak for 40 minutes, and then they'll get access to my course. But I mean, it's just going to keep going up. When like 3 years ago, I had any of this. Like this is kind of when I started 3 years ago posting. But it was over the course of 8 years, this book that I had just decided and said, no, I'm finishing something for myself. That was it. And then the momentum starts to go the other way in a positive direction, and it's hard for me to now stop. If anything, it's like, okay, I need to just control and slow down, which is like pretty awesome. I'd rather have that problem. But it is possible. You just start like inching. Okay, so be prepared for endlessly coming up against, I don't know. I don't know what I want to do. I don't know who I am. I don't know where to start. I don't know how to do this. I don't know anything about writing a book. I don't know anything about publishing. I don't know how to use LinkedIn. I don't know how to make a course. I don't know how to end a course. I don't know anything about lighting, editing. I don't know anything about speaking. You know, like I realized once I started pushing through that this is what was stopping me. I'd get to a point where something felt uncomfortable, when for me, if I was writing a screenplay, it'd be like I only thought about, I want to write this and, you know, my acceptance speech. It was like nothing in between. And then I realized going through this, I'm like, oh, it's like endlessly coming up against something you don't know how to do, which doesn't feel good. And then you go back to one of the excuses and you're like, I don't have time. I'm having twins or whatever it is. But no, those are the things. Pay attention to when you're stopping, whether it's growing your business or whatever you want to do. It's that uncomfortable thing, at least for me anyway. Okay, I'm going to quickly go through this last section, creative people problems. And the judgment from peers, I think, stops a lot of us. Like for me, working in advertising, it is a very judgy kind of field. We have panels that judge work. And when we look at work, we say why it's terrible or what we do differently. But the real world isn't actually like that. It's like in our world, we're very hard on the work, and people are so supportive, as I was saying earlier. And the other thing is, like, the first award show I judged was in Nigeria, like since I started on this path. It was like nothing in Vancouver. This is the first talk I've done in Vancouver. I've done talks in the UK, Australia, online. It was like 1,200 people showed up to hear me speak. It was like 400 in the UK, like, here, not much. And I think when it comes to judgment, we worry about like the people we work with, the people close to us. But once you start sharing, especially if it's like online and you do something, you realize like how small we're thinking. That, oh, I'm worried about this, but I'm now reaching people all over the world. I think we can all tend to, especially creatives in advertising, overvalue creativity. I'm like writing this course here. And I think it's because, like, you know, when I worked, you'd have like a copywriter with an art director. That was the creative team. And in the ad agency world, you're like up here. And you are like the big shots kind of, but it's so overvalued. And we realize, like, when you get out into the world and create things, how important execution is. Like ideas, we all have them. We have lots of them. Like there's this, I'm a Mac, I'm a PC. I think all this like, I'm a Mac, but really, you know, it's uniting these parts of our brain and embracing things that we're not good at as well, like becoming more whole. And maybe it's like building something with someone who doesn't think like you, if you have a partner, because I think a lot of times it's creatives talking to each other, sharing ideas. That's a good idea. We don't know how to make things. We don't bring them to life. So it's either igniting that part of your brain that you don't use and don't want to use and maybe don't enjoy using as much, or finding someone. When I look at the successful companies that have been built, even some of the agencies, they had a mixture of people who complemented each other. And then, of course, there's perfectionism. I don't need to add to that. I think once it's on a screen, we all know. I think we're so focused on details when we're in a creative department, whether it's design or writing, like way, way, way too far. But in the real world outside of that, it doesn't matter, especially with content nowadays. It's like, and even tech, the tech world, I think, is influencing us and how it's like an MVP product. We don't have enough time to be as polished as we are, slightly less polished, and get shit done. This is really my journey from like idiot to expert, in my own words. I wrote this not long ago. The difference between an idiot and an expert is one of them just stuck with something. You know, you just keep chipping away. Another thing that stops creatives is like, we don't want to use our art to make money. But I don't think that's true. I think that's just another excuse because that's an uncomfortable thing to do, and what an uncomfortable path. But, oh man, I had like 5 ads, and one of them was buy my book on copywriting so I can stop working as a copywriter. And I just share these on LinkedIn. Every time I share one, I don't share them all the time, but what do you know? The book like sells more. I shared this for my course recently. Like this post alone, when before I would post and it was like I'd get likes and whatever, it was probably like, I don't know, $2,000 or something. So I'm like, oh, I think I'm going to do that more. And it's not just like to make money. I think one of the most amazing things of this path is I've given the book 4,000 copies away. Like that's just the digital version, which is obviously easier. The course I've given away. There's a ad school based out of India through Africa, and people who can't afford an ad school, I've donated. Every Women's Day, I donate to women through that program. People will message me. I'm like, it's just so easy for me to give. I feel so good to have created something of value. And it's one of the biggest reasons why I want this path to like work for me, because man, that's awesome too, to have that feeling on top of it. The US money. Okay, close. The clicker wants me to talk about this more. Oh yeah. So I believe we're all kind of sitting on winning lottery tickets. I think the winning numbers are between our ears, and it's kind of up to us to like do the work, to kind of do the digging. We just have to start chipping away at something in a direction. It doesn't have to be the right thing, because doing that thing will be like, oh no, it's actually this I want to do. And all of that stuff will be applied to it, but you've got to start chipping away on something, anything. So this is back to my earlier gift. You will, all right, talk is sponsored by, of course. This Creative Creator Network is an idea I have now. Because I feel kind of alone in this path, and I'm connecting with a lot of creatives who want to create more for themselves. I'm building something. I don't know what it is. I don't know how tempting that is. It's not a good sell, but I will work up the value. Maybe later this year. It's either, I don't know if it's a course or community or both, or just a community. I think what I'm going to do, there's like 300 people have signed up on this wait list. Once, as it grows, same strategy as the F-box. Collecting email addresses. But yeah, and then I'm going to reach out to everyone, like what would be most helpful. So if you're interested, you can go to nelkencreative.com and sign up for my newsletter right now. This is the only way to do it. And it will give you a prompt from creative to creator, and you can add your email there. And I will not spam you, because I have not messaged a single person. Once I figure out what it is, I will send it, and I will never spam you. You can email me anytime about anything, Dan@nelkencreative.com, and connect with me on LinkedIn if you haven't. I think that's, oh yeah, questions. I'm going to have some water, but there's a microphone.
Hey Dan, of all these successful people you spoke of at the beginning, did any of them start off where they thought they were going to go to?
Mm-hmm. I bet like there's a reason James Patterson didn't like quit his job. He kept going until he was CEO. It took him a long time. I don't even think he likes working in advertising. And he even says his career as an author, nothing to do with his creative career, which I don't think is true. But I think of my friend, it's funny, my friend Jill, who sold the soap company. She's kind of right back where she started. Like, she's not done anything for a few years, not feeling valued, and she's trying to figure out what to do next. All she did, I remember back then, she's like, what's a boring category that I could make kind of interesting? She was a creative, and that's how she chose that. She wasn't passionate about soap, which is interesting to me, yeah. And then, but Jealous Curator, I know she was just doing this thing. She was like kind of quiet and just knew she was stuck and couldn't make things. Just not many people read it, but she just kept doing it. She built a habit and took off.
Awesome. Anybody else?
Hey Dan, thanks for the talk. I was just wondering here, when do you know that what you've been trying to finish has been finished, it's good enough?
I can only, so question was, how do you know if it's good enough, like you're finished? So I can speak in the book that I probably read that thing 400 times, and every time near the end, I could read it in a night. And I realized I could never read it without making a change. And I think I just got to a point where I didn't want to read it again. You know, I was kind of sick of it. And yeah, that's why I'm not talking about it tonight. No, that's not why. But yeah, I just endlessly went over it, and I was like, this is as good. I knew I could always be better, but this is as good as I'm able to make it. And I have to move on with my life, because I always knew, for me, the book was the first thing. If I finished one thing, I knew I could do more things. I didn't expect for it to be what it's become. You know, there's always part of you that hopes, but that was it. It was just, but I did want it to be good, and that's why I read it so many times. And yeah, I just get sick of it. I think some people like hit publish on books and do things sooner just because they want to do it, and then they're not that good. So you have to really exhaust yourself, I think. Yeah. I don't know. That's just me. I don't know. Other people would probably have a different answer.
I have a question on that myself. I feel like a lot of us as creatives, we work with other creatives. So there's like a vetting process built into the stuff we make for clients.
Right.
Did you have something like that for the book? Did you have people that were looking over your shoulder and being like, damn, this sucks, or like, no, we can fix this section? Did you rely on any systems like that for yourself?
No, not enough. Not enough. I had a few people read it. In hindsight, like the course, had I vetted it and had more people do it, I would have been more sure of the value. I had enough people read it to give me feedback that I knew I needed but didn't want to hear. It was like something very structural about the book that I'm like, I know this would make it better, but I don't want to do that. And then they were like, you know, it'd be better if it did this. I was like, yeah, I know. So I think you can probably do too much of that too. Really, I think why it's done well is I kind of wrote it to myself. I didn't try to impress anyone. I didn't have a lofty title anywhere to be like, oh, this, you know, I just wrote what I needed. I took things out like, oh, this is trying to be too funny. I wanted to be helpful and a little bit funny in places. So I did have some idea of what I wanted, but that was it. And even when I share stuff like tonight, like what have I always needed to hear? What do I still need to hear? I don't worry too much about what are other people expecting. I just hope it resonates, and I've been maybe lucky, I don't know, or maybe we all have more in common than we think, and that's why it's resonated. You know?
Anyone else?
You mentioned a couple of times that you realized your value, and it sounds like you're always sort of realizing your value. Do you have any hints? I don't know, open question on talking about realizing your value, I guess.
Yeah. She's just asked about realizing your value and how to do that. I think it's tough because we always struggle as freelancers, even how much to bill. So like for the course, what I did, I gave it away in exchange for, you know, people to hurt my feelings with feedback. I wanted the feedback where the people giving it were kind of apologizing too, like, because I knew that this would convince me of it. So I had done some paid talks. I didn't know how much fully to bill. Is it too much? Is it not enough? So I reached out actually to a local agency and said, can I do this for free in exchange for, you know, hurting my feelings? They said yes, and that talk convinced me of the value. I was like, what do I need to do to convince myself of the value? And I think as freelancers or even, you know, full-time employees, we don't do that enough. Because as creatives, our value is often determined by other people, what they think of our work, If we get a title, if we get a raise, we feel valued. If we have negative feedback, we feel sad. But once you're sure of your value, like that stuff feels good, feels a little bad, but you know what you're worth. And once you know your worth, it's how I'm now going to be able to like sell that course more or sell my talks, because, you know, I've pretty much convinced myself of its value by I reached out to 50 people who had taken my course, and there's some system. At what point does it feel too cheap? At what point does it feel too expensive? It was like, I forget the name of the method. Told me, okay, this course should be double, triple. So then what I did was I added way more value. I updated all these lessons and still charged lower. So now, without a doubt, I know I can sell the thing. So it's avoiding things, because when you are finding out about your value, you run the risk of people saying it's not good, which happened to my course and happened to my book. The bad feeling, then you make it better, and then you know your value and you can charge more and do that. So that's what I have to say on that. Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
Well, did you see more?
Okay.
This is a bit of
Yeah. Sell them.
clean parent. Talk about it before. Obviously, been doing client work and then personal work. What does the self-talk sound like? Creating time, space to be that and be in our way.
Yeah. I mean, I don't really know if there's like self-talk around that. Like, I know that I built the habit now. It just felt, I guess, so good to have an impact in the world. And feel, so now, before I was too tired, like the choice becomes easy when it's the kids are in bed, to like work on my thing when I never would have, you know, even before kids. I don't know why I was so tired and busy, but so you have kids and you're like, oh, this is busy. So I don't know, it kind of motivated me, you know, having kids, because I'm like, I had enough excuses on my own without them. And now I got loads every day. And I was like, I just can't. I think I just was like, I got to a point where like, are you full of shit and not going to make any? If that's true, get a job. My problem was I didn't work myself up in the corporate world. So the jobs I would get were like, no, I just couldn't do it. And so I guess it was like feeling that frustration to be like, you're not a fraud, or you are, and stop coming up with ideas and just get a fucking job and stop it, or do something about it. And that was some of my self-talk, I guess. Yeah.
Let's do one last question.
Cheers. I resonated with what you said about putting all your creativity into the work. And I find like with the job, it's like easy for ideas to flow and to get excited about them. But then when it comes to doing personal work, that excitement is like harder to find. And I wonder if you just have any like, I don't know, personal experience or suggestions as to how to find the excitement in your own work.
Yeah. So how finding the excitement for your own ideas, like you can get it for ideas at work, but you know, I would say like doing the book wasn't exciting. It's like that birthing process. But going through that is like so rewarding. So even now that I'm at this stage, if I have a Google Doc, so it's headlines for my book or this course or even video ideas, I have not made many of them. Like, it's just so fun. Like, I have a product and like, man, I could get a brief for a stapler in an ad agency and be like, oh, okay, this is exciting. So I think it's like just building the habit. And once you have a thing, like we could make up a thing tomorrow, like a funny Instagram account or whatever, and write lines for that or come up with ideas. Like, I think it's choosing something. It's hard because you have your own like personal baggage and then all these excuses. So you do have to fight through some stuff, but I just can't tell you how I screwed up my slides, but the headlines that I share from my book, I don't care if, like, someone posts me today, you didn't share a link to your book. It's like, I didn't share that ad to sell the book. Like, if you want it, you can like enter it. I sometimes do, but I didn't. It was more like, I didn't want to push it on anyone. I'm just sharing a creative headline that I wrote that I wouldn't have been able to get through in an agency, or I would have had to go through all these layers of approval. And it was like, I can just it just feels so good. Like, I don't need to make money from that. And I feel like I'm not done. That's why this whole like creator network or whatever it's called, it's like, that will allow me to do, then I can make things with other people and we can just make stuff. Like, that's all I've ever wanted. And I think back to when I got into advertising. Even before, what got me into it was I had ideas. I didn't know what to do with them. And jobs give us a place to do something with it, and we don't have to figure out on our own. But I don't know, man. It's just like, pick an idea and just choose a cadence that 15 minutes a week. It'll come. Like, it comes from doing. It doesn't come before, is what I realized. Yeah. It's a long answer. I talk a lot. I'm not done yet.
I love it. Let's give her a last round of applause.